Sarah stood at the edge of the quiet cemetery, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers in one hand and a plastic bucket filled with soapy water in the other. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of fallen leaves and damp earth. Autumn had painted the landscape in shades of gold and amber, but there was no joy in this place, only memories etched into stone. Every Sunday without fail, Sarah visited Michael's grave. It had become her ritual, her way of keeping him close even though he was gone. 2 years had passed since the accident that took his life, yet the pain still lingered like an open wound that refused to heal fully. Some days were easier than others, but Sundays always felt heavier. Maybe it was because weekends used to be their time together. Lazy mornings spent sipping coffee, long walks through the park, laughter echoing through their cozy home. But now those moments existed only in her mind, frozen in photographs scattered across her bedroom dresser. The cemetery lay on the outskirts of town, far from the noise of traffic and bustling streets. It was peaceful here, almost serene, if not for the weight of grief that seemed to hang over every corner. Rows upon rows of headstones stretched out before her, each marking the final resting place of someone's loved one. Today, however, the grounds were unusually empty. Only an elderly caretaker could be seen in the distance, trimming hedges near the entrance. His slow movements matched the stillness of the surroundings. Sarah walked slowly along the gravel path, her shoes crunching softly against the ground. She knew the route by heart. It led straight to Michael's grave, tucked away in a quieter section of the cemetery. As she approached, she noticed how the elements had begun to claim the marble surface of his headstone. Dirt clung stubbornly to the engraved letters of his name, and patches of moss crept along its base. Guilt pricked at her chest. She hadn't cleaned it properly last week. Kneeling down carefully, Sarah placed the flowers beside the headstone and dipped a cloth into the soapy water. Her hands moved methodically, scrubbing away the grime as thoughts of Michael flooded her mind. She remembered the first time they met, a chance encounter at a bookstore where he accidentally knocked over a stack of novels while reaching for one she'd been eyeing. They laughed about it later, sitting side by side on a park bench, talking for hours until the sun dipped below the horizon. That night, neither of them wanted to say goodbye. Tears welled up in her eyes as she worked, blurring her vision momentarily. She blinked them away, focusing instead on the task at hand. "I miss you," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. "Every single day." Talking to him like this had become second nature. Though she knew he couldn't hear her, it made her feel less alone somehow. As she leaned back on her heels to inspect her progress, a sound pierced the silence. A faint whimper, barely louder than the wind brushing through the trees. At first, Sarah thought it might be an animal, perhaps a stray dog or cat seeking shelter among the graves. But then it came again, clearer this time, the unmistakable cry of a child. Her heart skipped a beat. Children didn't belong in places like this, not alone anyway. Setting the cloth down, she turned her head, scanning the area around her. The caretaker was still busy near the entrance, oblivious to anything happening further inside the cemetery. There was no sign of anyone else nearby. The crying grew louder, more insistent, tugging at something deep within her chest. Hesitation gripped her for a moment. What if it was nothing? What if she imagined it? But the urge to investigate was stronger than her doubts. Rising to her feet, she grabbed the bucket and headed toward the source of the sound, leaving Michael's grave behind. With each step, the cries became sharper, more desperate. They seemed to echo off the tombstones, bouncing unpredictably until it was impossible to pinpoint their exact origin. Sarah quickened her pace, her pulse racing. Something about the situation felt surreal, almost dreamlike. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not here, not today. Finally, she rounded a cluster of tall oak trees and spotted her. A little girl, no older than 5, sat huddled beneath one of the branches, clutching a stuffed rabbit tightly against her chest. Her blonde hair was tangled, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She looked utterly lost, her wide eyes darting nervously as Sarah approached. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Sarah simply stared, trying to process what she was seeing. Then gathering her composure, she knelt down a few feet away, making sure to keep her movement slow and non-threatening. "Hi there," she said gently, forcing a smile onto her face. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The girl sniffled, wiping her nose with the sleeve of her sweater. When she finally spoke, her voice was trembling. I can't find my mommy. Sarah's..." Stomach tightened. How had a child ended up in a cemetery all by herself? And where were her parents? Questions swirled in her mind, but she pushed them aside for now. The most important thing was to comfort the girl and figure out who she was and why she was here. "Don't worry," Sarah reassured her, reaching out cautiously. "We'll find your mommy, okay? Do you remember where you last saw her?" The girl shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I don't know." Sarah sighed, glancing around the deserted cemetery. Whoever this child belonged to, they clearly weren't nearby. For now, she would have to take matters into her own hands. Picking up the bucket, she extended her free hand toward the girl. "Come with me. Let's go somewhere safe and we'll figure everything out together." After a brief hesitation, the girl nodded and slipped her tiny hand into Sarah's. Together, they began walking back toward the main path, leaving behind the eerie quiet of the graveyard. Little did Sarah know, this chance encounter would change her life forever and uncover secrets buried just as deeply as the graves surrounding her. Sarah's grip tightened slightly around the little girl's hand as they made their way back toward the entrance of the cemetery. The child, still clutching her stuffed rabbit with one arm, shuffled along quietly, her small sneakers scuffing against the gravel path. Despite Sarah's attempts to reassure her, the girl remained visibly shaken, her eyes darting nervously from side to side as though expecting something, or someone, to appear out of nowhere. As they walked, Sarah couldn't help but feel unsettled, herself. There was something strange about this situation, something that didn't quite add up. Cemeteries weren't places where children typically wandered alone, especially not ones dressed in casual clothes like this girl. Her sweater and jeans looked clean enough, albeit slightly disheveled, and her shoes showed no signs of wear beyond normal use. It was almost as if she hadn't been outside for long, a stark contrast to the tear-streaked face and frightened demeanor she carried. "Do you know your mommy's name?" Sarah asked gently, trying again to coax some information out of the girl. She kept her tone light, hoping not to overwhelm her further. The girl hesitated, then shook her head. "No," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what? About your daddy? Do you remember his name?" This time the girl stopped walking altogether. She turned to look at Sarah, her wide eyes filled with confusion and something else. Recognition? Fear? Sarah couldn't tell. For a moment the child simply stared at her as if weighing whether or not to answer. Finally she pointed toward the direction they had come from, the part of the cemetery where Michael's grave lay. "That's Daddy," she said softly. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. "What did you say?" she asked, her voice trembling now. The girl nodded, her expression solemn. "Daddy promised he'd come back." A chill ran down Sarah's spine. She glanced over her shoulder at the rows of tombstones stretching behind them, each one bearing names and dates carved into cold stone. None of it made sense. How could this child possibly know anything about Michael? And why would she refer to him as Daddy? Yet there was no mistaking the conviction in her voice, the certainty with which she spoke. Forcing herself to stay calm, Sarah knelt down to meet the girl's gaze directly. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" she asked, her tone soft but probing. The girl hesitated again, then whispered, "Lily." "Lily," Sarah repeated, testing the name on her tongue. It felt familiar somehow, though she couldn't place why. She reached out to brush a strand of hair away from Lily's face, studying her features more closely. The resemblance was undeniable, the shape of her nose, the curve of her lips, the faint dimple in her cheek when she frowned. All of it reminded Sarah of Michael. But how could that be? He had never mentioned having children before they met, let alone after. Or had he? Before Sarah could press further, Lily tugged gently on her hand. Can we go see Daddy? She asked, her voice tinged with both hope and sadness. Sarah hesitated, torn between logic and instinct. On one hand, taking a child back to a grave site seemed inappropriate, even morbid. On the other hand, she needed answers. Answers only. Lily might provide. After a brief internal struggle, she nodded. Okay, Lily, let's go. Hand in hand, they retraced their steps through the winding paths of the cemetery until they reached Michael's grave. The freshly cleaned headstone gleamed faintly in the afternoon sunlight, its inscription standing out sharply against the polished marble. Sarah watched as Lily released her grip and stepped closer to the grave, her movements slow and deliberate. She crouched down, running her fingers lightly over the engraved letters of Michael's name. "Hi, Daddy," she said softly, her voice breaking slightly. "I missed you." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she observed the scene. Part of her wanted to believe this was all some bizarre coincidence. A child who happened to share Michael's last name stumbling into the same cemetery by chance. But deep down, she knew better. This wasn't random. There was a connection. Here, however impossible it might seem. After a few moments, Lily stood up and turned to face Sarah. "He said he'd come back," she repeated, her voice firmer now. "But he hasn't." Sarah swallowed hard, struggling to find the right words. "Lily," she began cautiously, Do you live nearby? Is there anyone we can call to take you home?" Lily shook her head. "Mommy said we couldn't stay anymore. We had to leave." "Leave where?" Sarah pressed, her curiosity growing stronger with every cryptic response. Again, Lily hesitated, her lower lip quivering. "The house. The bad people came." Sarah's heart sank. Bad people? What did that mean? Was this child talking about abuse, neglect, something worse? Whatever the case, it was clear that Lily wasn't safe wherever she had come from, but without more information, Sarah had no idea how to proceed. Just then, the distant sound of footsteps broke the silence. Both Sarah and Lily turned to see the elderly caretaker approaching, his hands full of gardening tools. He stopped short. When he noticed the pair standing by Michael's grave, his brow furrowing in concern. "Everything all right here?" he asked, his voice gruff but kind. Sarah forced a smile, rising to her feet. "Yes, thank you. I found this little girl wandering, near the oak tree. She seems to be lost." The caretaker studied Lily for a moment, then shook his head. "Haven't seen any visitors today except for you," he said. "And trust me, I'd notice if someone brought a kid along." Sarah nodded, though unease continued to gnaw at her. If Lily hadn't come with anyone, how had she ended up here? And why did she insist on calling Michael Daddy? "Well, perhaps you've seen her before," Sarah ventured, unwilling to give up just yet. "Maybe someone reported her missing recently." The caretaker scratched his chin thoughtfully, then shook his head again. "Not that I recall. Sorry, ma'am." Disappointment washed over Sarah, but she quickly masked it. Turning back to Lily, she offered her hand once more. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's get you somewhere warm while we figure this out." Lily hesitated briefly, glancing back at Michael's grave one last time. Then, reluctantly, she took Sarah's hand and allowed herself to be led away. As they walked, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being drawn into something far bigger than she could comprehend. The pieces of the puzzle were scattered, incomplete, but already they hinted at a story far more complicated than she had imagined. By the time they reached the caretaker's office near the entrance, Sarah's mind was racing. Who was Lily? Really? Where had she come from? And most importantly, what role did Michael play in all of this? One thing was certain. Whatever secrets lay hidden beneath the surface, Sarah was determined to uncover them, for Lily's sake, and for her own. Sarah sat on a worn wooden bench just outside the caretaker's office, her mind swirling with questions as Lily perched beside her. The little girl clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly, her knuckles white against the soft fabric. Though she seemed calmer now, there was still an undercurrent of unease in her demeanor, a tension that made Sarah's heart ache. She wanted to comfort Lily, to tell her everything would be okay. But how could she promise something she wasn't sure of herself? The caretaker had offered them a cup of tea from his tiny electric kettle, though neither Sarah nor Lily touched it. Instead, they sat in silence for a while, the only sounds coming from the occasional rustle of leaves overhead and the distant hum of traffic beyond the cemetery gates. It was peaceful here, almost too peaceful, given the circumstances. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to reveal itself. "Lily," Sarah began gently, breaking the quiet. "Can you tell me more about your mommy? Where were you living before today?" Lily glanced up at her, her big eyes filled with hesitation. For a moment, Sarah thought she might refuse to answer, but then she spoke softly, her words halting. "We lived in a house near the park, but Mommy said we had to leave because bad people came." "Bad people?" Sarah repeated, her brow furrowing. "What kind of bad people, sweetheart?" Lily shook her head, her lips pressed together tightly. "I don't know. Just bad." Sarah sighed, frustration bubbling beneath her calm exterior. Every question seemed to lead to another dead end, leaving her no closer to understanding who Lily really was or why she kept referring to Michael as Daddy. Still, she couldn't give up, not yet. Something inside her told her this child needed help, even if she didn't fully understand what form that help should take. After a few moments of silence, Sarah tried a different approach. "Do you remember anything else about your daddy? Anything he used to say or do?" Lily tilted her head, thinking hard. Then slowly she nodded. "He liked stories," she said. "He read me bedtime stories every night, and he promised he'd always come back." Sarah's chest tightened at the words. They sounded so familiar, like echoes of memories she and Michael had shared during their time together. He had loved storytelling too, often reading aloud from old novels or making up tales off the top of his head. Could it be possible that Lily was somehow connected to him? If so, how? Why hadn't Michael ever mentioned having a child? As these thoughts raced through her mind, the caretaker emerged from his office, holding a clipboard. His expression was grim as he approached them. "Sorry to interrupt," he said gruffly, "but I checked my records. No one's reported a missing child matching her description recently." Sarah nodded, unsurprised but disappointed nonetheless. "Thank you for checking," she said politely, forcing a smile. Inside, however, she felt a pang of helplessness. Without any leads, what was she supposed to do next? Leave Lily here alone? Take her to the police station? Neither option felt right. The caretaker hesitated, glancing between Sarah and Lily. "You planning on calling social services?" he asked cautiously. "I'll figure something out," Sarah replied, though her tone betrayed her uncertainty. She knew contacting authorities was likely the responsible thing to do, but something held her back. Maybe it was the way Lily clung to her hand, trusting and vulnerable. Or maybe it was the nagging suspicion that unraveling this mystery required, more than filing a report and walking away. For now, she decided to focus on getting Lily somewhere safe. Standing up, she extended her hand toward the girl. "Come on, Lily. Let's go home for a bit. We can figure everything out later." To her relief, Lily didn't protest. She slipped her small hand into Sarah's and allowed herself to be led toward the parking lot where Sarah's car was parked. As they walked, Sarah couldn't help but notice how naturally the gesture felt, how easy it was to imagine this being part of her everyday life. But she quickly pushed the thought aside. There were far bigger issues to deal with before entertaining such ideas. Back at Sarah's house, the atmosphere shifted slightly. The cozy warmth of her living room provided a stark contrast to the cold solemnity of the cemetery. Sarah ushered Lily inside, helping her remove her shoes before settling her onto the couch. She wrapped a blanket around the girl's shoulders and handed her a glass of water, all the while keeping a close eye on her. "Reactions, are you hungry?" Sarah asked, gesturing toward the kitchen. "I can make us some sandwiches if you'd like." Lily nodded shyly, clutching her rabbit closer. "Okay." While preparing the food, Sarah's mind continued to churn. She couldn't ignore the growing sensed that Lily's presence in her life wasn't entirely coincidental. There had to be a reason why fate, or whatever force governed such things, had brought them together. Determined to find answers, she resolved to dig deeper into Michael's past once Lily was settled. When the sandwiches were ready, Sarah returned to the living room and set the plate on the coffee table. Lily ate quietly, her movements slow and deliberate. Watching her, Sarah felt a surge of protectiveness. Whoever this child was, whatever secrets surrounded her, Sarah knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't let anyone hurt her again. Once they finished eating, Sarah cleared away the dishes and returned to sit beside Lily. "Do you want to watch a movie?" she asked, hoping to distract the girl from her worries. "Or maybe look at some pictures?" At the mention of pictures, Lily's interest perked up slightly. "Pictures?" she echoed, tilting her head. "Yes," Sarah replied, smiling faintly. "I have albums full of photos from when I was younger, and from when I was with Michael." She rose from the couch and retrieved an old photo album from a shelf in the hallway. Returning to her seat, she opened it carefully, flipping through pages until she found what she was looking for. Her breath caught as she turned the book toward Lily, revealing a faded photograph of Michael standing beside a young woman cradling a baby in her arms. The resemblance was undeniable. The same blonde hair, the same delicate features. "That's you," Sarah said softly, pointing to the infant in the picture. "Isn't it?" Lily stared at the photo, her eyes wide with wonder. Slowly, she nodded. "That's me and Daddy," she whispered. A wave of emotion crashed over Sarah as the truth clicked into place. This wasn't just some random child who happened to wander into the cemetery. It was Michael's daughter. Somehow, impossibly, she had found her way to Sarah, seeking answers or perhaps even redemption. Whatever the case, Sarah realized she couldn't turn away now, not when the threads of fate had woven them together so intricately. With newfound determination, Sarah closed the album and set it aside. Turning to Lily, she smiled warmly. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll figure everything out together. I promise." And for the first time since discovering her husband's grave, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope, not just for herself, but for the little girl who had unknowingly stepped into her life and changed it forever. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. The sun filtered through the curtains of her bedroom, casting soft golden light across the room. She lay still for a moment, staring at the ceiling as her mind raced over everything that had happened the day before. Lily was asleep in the spare bedroom down the hall, her small frame curled under a quilt Sarah had brought out of storage. It was strange how quickly life could change, how one unexpected encounter could unravel secrets buried so deeply they seemed almost forgotten. Sarah got dressed quietly, careful not to wake Lily. As much as she wanted answers, she knew she couldn't leave the girl alone while she went digging into Michael's past. Instead, she decided to start by making breakfast, a simple gesture meant to bring some normalcy to their unusual situation. Pancakes sizzled on the stove as she flipped them absent-mindedly, her thoughts drifting back to the photograph she'd shown Lily the night before. That picture. It had been taken during a family outing, long before Sarah ever met Michael. At the time, he'd told her it was just an old snapshot from his college days, nothing special. But now she realized it wasn't nothing. That baby in Emily's arms was Lily. And if Lily truly was Michael's daughter, then there was far more to his story than he'd ever let on. When the pancakes were ready, Sarah carried 2 plates to the dining table and gently knocked on the door of the spare bedroom. "Lily? Are you awake?" A sleepy voice answered from inside. "Breakfast is ready," Sarah said warmly. "Come whenever you're ready." A few minutes later, Lily shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes with the sleeve of her borrowed pajamas. Her stuffed rabbit dangled limply from one hand, its fur matted from being clutched tightly all night. Sarah smiled as she watched the girl climb onto a chair at the table, her movements slow but steady. "Do you like pancakes?" Sarah asked, sliding a plate toward her. Lily nodded shyly, picking up a fork and poking at the stack. For a moment they ate in silence, the only sound the scrape of utensils against plates. Sarah studied Lily discreetly, marveling at how much she resembled Michael, not just in looks but in mannerisms too. The way she tilted her head when thinking, the faint dimple that appeared when she smiled. It was uncanny. Once they finished eating, Sarah cleared the dishes and turned to face Lily. "I need to make a few phone calls today," she explained, gently. "But I promise I won't leave you alone. You can stay here and draw or watch TV if you'd like. Does that sound okay?" Lily nodded again, though her expression betrayed a hint of worry. "Are you going to find my mommy?" "I'm going to try," Sarah replied honestly. "But first I need to learn more about your daddy, about Michael." Later that afternoon, Sarah sat at her desk, her laptop open in front of her. She had spent hours combing through old emails and documents saved on Michael's computer, searching for any mention of Emily or Lily. Most of the files were work-related, mundane spreadsheets and reports that offered no clues. Just as frustration began to creep in, she stumbled upon something tucked away in a folder labeled Personal, a scanned copy of a birth certificate. Her hands trembled as she opened the file. Sure enough, the document confirmed what she already suspected. Lily Ann Thompson, born to Emily Carter and Michael Thompson. The date matched the timeline Sarah had pieced together from the photograph. A surge of emotions washed over her: anger, sadness, confusion, but above all, determination. This was proof. Irrefutable evidence that Michael had kept a huge part of his life hidden from her. But why? Had he been ashamed? Afraid? Or was there something else she didn't yet understand? Determined to uncover the full story, Sarah turned, her attention to finding Emily. A quick online search revealed little beyond basic public records, so she expanded her search to include social media profiles and obituaries. Eventually, she found a Facebook page belonging to someone named Rachel Carter, listed as Emily's sister. There were no recent posts, but older photos showed Emily smiling alongside a young child who bore a striking resemblance to Lily. Taking a deep breath, Sarah composed a message. "Hi, Rachel, my name is Sarah, and I think we may have something important to discuss regarding your sister Emily and her daughter Lily. Please reach out when you can. I'd really appreciate your help." "Thank you." She hit send before second-guessing herself, then leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly. Now all she could do was wait. Meanwhile, Lily occupied herself in the living room, flipping through channels on the TV until she settled on a cartoon about talking animals. Every so often, Sarah peeked in to check on her, offering snacks or suggesting activities. Despite the strangeness of their circumstances, Lily seemed remarkably calm, as if sensing that Sarah genuinely cared for her. By early evening, Sarah received a reply from Rachel. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened the message. "Hi, Sarah, I saw your note. I don't know where this is coming from, but I haven't heard from Emily in years. If you're trying to contact her, good luck. You won't find her. Can you explain what this is about?" Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Finally, she typed out a response. "Rachel, I'm sorry to bring up painful memories, but I believe I've found Lily. She showed up unexpectedly yesterday, and based on what I've learned, I think she's Michael's daughter. I need your help understanding what happened to Emily and why Lily might be alone. Please call me if you're willing to talk." Minutes passed before Rachel replied, her tone shifting from skepticism to concern. "You found Lily? Is she safe? Where are you?" Sarah provided her number and address, urging Rachel to come visit as soon as possible. Within the hour, Rachel called, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is insane," Rachel said after Sarah explained everything. Emily disappeared shortly after Lily was born. Everyone assumed the worst. The police investigated, but they never found anything concrete. Afterward, I moved away to escape the rumors. I swear, I had no idea Lily survived." "Survived?" Sarah echoed, her stomach tightening. "What do you mean?" Rachel hesitated, then sighed, heavily. There were whispers, rumors about powerful people involved, people who didn't want Emily raising Lily. Some even suggested foul play, but without evidence, nothing stuck. I stayed quiet because I was scared, but if Lily's alive... Her voice broke. I'll drive over right now. We need to figure this out. When Rachel arrived later that evening, Sarah greeted her at the door, ushering her inside. The resemblance between the sisters was undeniable, though Rachel looked older, wearier. She introduced herself to Lily, tears welling up in her eyes, as she hugged the girl tightly. For the first time since meeting her, Lily smiled, a genuine, radiant smile that lit up the entire room. Watching them together, Sarah felt a pang of longing mixed with relief. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Lily wasn't alone anymore, and neither was Sarah. As the three of them sat around the kitchen table, Rachel recounted fragments of Emily's story: the difficult pregnancy, the mysterious disappearance, the hushed accusations that followed. Piece by piece, the puzzle began to take shape. By the end of the night, Sarah realized the truth was far darker than she'd imagined, but also far more hopeful. With Rachel's help, she vowed to protect Lily and uncover the rest of the secrets hiding in the shadows of Michael's past. The days that followed Rachel's arrival were a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. Sarah, Rachel, and Lily spent hours talking, piecing together fragments of Emily's life and the events that had led to her disappearance. Each new detail brought them closer to understanding the truth, but it also painted a picture far more complex and sinister than any of them could have imagined. Rachel explained how Emily had fallen in love with Michael during their college years. Their relationship was passionate but tumultuous, marked by ups and downs as they navigated young adulthood. When Emily became pregnant, Michael initially stepped up, promising to support her through everything. But as the months passed, cracks began to form. Michael grew distant, overwhelmed by the responsibilities of impending fatherhood and his own ambitions. By the time Lily was born, he had all but vanished from their lives, leaving Emily to raise the child on her own. At first, Emily tried to make things work. She moved back in with her parents, who helped care for Lily while she juggled odd jobs to make ends meet. But soon strange things started happening. Letters arriving at odd hours, phone calls with no one on the other end, cars parked outside her house late at night. Emily confided in Rachel that she felt like someone was watching her, though she couldn't explain why. Then one day, Emily simply disappeared. Her car was found abandoned near a remote stretch of highway, its doors unlocked and personal belongings still inside. The police launched an investigation, but without concrete evidence or witnesses, the case eventually went cold. Rumors spread throughout their small town. Some claimed Emily had run away voluntarily, unable to handle the pressures of single motherhood. Others whispered about foul play, pointing fingers at influential figures rumored to be connected to Michael's family. "I never believed she left willingly," Rachel said, her voice trembling as she recounted the story. "Emily loved Lily more than anything. There's no way she would have abandoned her." Sarah listened intently, her heart breaking for the woman she had never met, but whose shadow now loomed large over their lives. It was clear that Emily's disappearance wasn't just a tragedy. It was part of something bigger, something darker. And if Rachel's suspicions were correct, powerful people had played a role in silencing her. Determined to uncover the full truth, Sarah and Rachel decided to dig deeper into Michael's past. They combed through old newspapers, legal documents, and online forums, searching for any mention of Emily's case or the individuals implicated in the rumors. What they uncovered was chilling: a web of corruption involving local politicians, business tycoons, and even members of Michael's extended family. These were people who thrived on control, using intimidation and manipulation to protect their interests and silence anyone who threatened to expose them. One name kept surfacing repeatedly: Victor Langston, a wealthy real estate developer with ties to Michael's father. According to whispers circulating online, Langston had been involved in several high-profile scandals over the years, though none had ever stuck due to lack of evidence. More disturbingly, there were allegations linking him to cases of missing persons, particularly women who had crossed paths with his associates. "Do you think he had something to do with Emily?" Sarah asked Rachel one evening as they pored. Overprinted articles spread across the dining table. Rachel hesitated, her expression grim. I don't know for sure, but it wouldn't surprise me. Emily mentioned his name once, right before she disappeared. She said someone had warned her to stay quiet about certain things or else. Certain things, Sarah pressed, her pulse quickening. Rachel shook her head. She wouldn't tell me. Whatever it was, it scared her. As they continued their investigation, Sarah noticed subtle changes in Lily's behavior. The little girl who had initially seemed so withdrawn and fragile was slowly coming out of her shell. She laughed more often now, especially when Sarah read her bedtime stories or helped her draw pictures. Yet there were moments when Lily's mood shifted unexpectedly, a fleeting look of sadness or fear that made Sarah wonder what memories lingered beneath the surface. One afternoon, while coloring at the kitchen table, Lily suddenly stopped and looked up at Sarah. Why did Mommy leave me? The question caught Sarah off guard. She knelt beside Lily, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Your mommy didn't want to leave you, sweetheart. Something happened that made her go away, but I promise we're going to find out the truth. Lily stared at her for a long moment, then nodded solemnly. Okay. Though the exchange was brief, it weighed heavily on Sarah. She realized that protecting Lily meant not only uncovering the truth, but also helping her heal from the trauma of losing both her parents. That responsibility felt enormous, yet Sarah embraced it wholeheartedly. For the first time in years, she felt truly needed, not just as Michael's widow, but as someone capable of making a difference in another person's life. With each passing day, Sarah and Rachel gathered more evidence, building a case strong enough to confront those responsible for Emily's disappearance. They reached out to journalists, activists, and lawyers willing to take on risky cases involving corruption. Some dismissed their claims outright, citing insufficient proof. Others promised to look into the matter further, though progress was slow. Despite the challenges, Sarah refused to give up. She poured every ounce of energy into seeking justice for Emily and ensuring Lily's safety. At night, after tucking Lily into bed, she often sat alone in the living room, staring at photographs of Michael and wondering how much he had known about the forces working against Emily. Had he turned a blind eye? Or had he genuinely been unaware of the danger surrounding his ex-girlfriend and daughter? Whatever the answer, Sarah knew she couldn't let anger consume her. Instead, she focused on the present, the bond forming between her and Lily, the resilience they shared, and the hope that someday the truth would come to light. Weeks turned into months, and gradually, pieces of the puzzle began falling into place. A former employee of Victor Langston came forward, revealing incriminating details about illegal activities within the company. Anonymous tips led investigators to hidden bank accounts and forged documents implicating key players in the conspiracy. Though the road ahead remained uncertain, Sarah and Rachel finally had enough leverage to demand answers. On a chilly autumn morning, the same season Sarah had first encountered Lily, they stood together outside the courthouse, holding hands, with Lily nestled safely between them. Reporters swarmed around, cameras flashing as reporters shouted questions. But Sarah barely noticed. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, where sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the world. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel hopeful, not just for Lily, but for everyone touched by this tragedy. Justice might take time, but it was within reach. And until then, Sarah vowed to keep fighting, for Emily, for Michael, and most importantly, for the little girl who had become her reason to believe in second chances. Months had passed since Sarah and Rachel first began unraveling the tangled threads of Emily's disappearance. The journey had been long, exhausting, and emotionally draining, but it had also brought unexpected moments of clarity and connection. For Sarah, the experience had transformed her in ways she never anticipated. She had started this path as a grieving widow searching for answers, but somewhere along the way she had become something more. A protector, a nurturer, and even a fighter for justice. Lily, too, had changed. The once quiet and fearful child now laughed freely, her eyes sparkling with curiosity about the world around her. She loved spending time with Sarah, whether it was reading stories together, playing games, or simply sitting outside under the shade of an old oak tree. To Sarah, Lily wasn't just Michael's daughter anymore, she was hers too, not by blood but by choice, by love. The breakthrough came on a crisp spring morning, when the air smelled fresh and new, like the promise of renewal after winter's chill. A whistleblower within Victor Langston's organization had finally provided concrete evidence linking him to Emily's disappearance. It turned out that Emily had stumbled upon documents exposing illegal land deals involving Langston and several high-ranking officials. When she threatened to go public, they silenced her, first by intimidation, then by orchestrating her abduction. Though Emily's exact whereabouts remained unknown, investigators discovered records suggesting she had been moved repeatedly before ultimately disappearing from the grid entirely. Whether she was still alive was unclear, but the revelation confirmed what Rachel and Sarah had suspected all along. Powerful forces had conspired against her, leaving Lily orphaned and alone. Armed with this information, Sarah and Rachel worked tirelessly to ensure the truth saw the light of day. They collaborated with journalists, activists, and lawyers who championed their cause. Public outrage grew as news outlets covered the scandal, shining a spotlight on decades of corruption and abuse of power. Protests erupted outside Langston's headquarters, demanding accountability. Slowly but surely, cracks began forming in the fortress he had built around himself. Victor Langston was arrested shortly thereafter, his empire crumbling under the weight of accusations. Dozens of others implicated in the conspiracy followed suit, facing charges ranging from fraud to human trafficking. While justice wouldn't bring Emily back, it offered a measure of closure, not just for Lily but for everyone affected by their actions. Through it all, Sarah focused on building a stable, loving home for Lily. With Rachel's blessing, she officially adopted the little girl, giving her a fresh start in life. Together, they created routines and traditions, filling their days with laughter and warmth. On weekends, they visited the cemetery where Michael's grave lay, bringing flowers not only for him, but also for Emily. Sarah made sure Lily understood that both her parents had loved her deeply, even if circumstances had kept them apart. One Sunday afternoon, as they stood side by side near Michael's headstone, Lily pointed to the neighboring plot. "Who's that?" she asked, tilting her head curiously. Sarah followed her gaze and felt a lump rise in her throat. Beside Michael's grave was another stone, one belonging to Emily. Until recently, it had gone unnoticed, neglected and overgrown with weeds. But now, thanks to Rachel, it bore fresh flowers every week. Someone had taken care to clean it, ensuring Emily's memory wasn't forgotten. "That's your mommy," Sarah said softly, kneeling beside Lily. "She loved you very much." Lily's brow furrowed slightly, as though trying to process the idea. Then, after a moment, she nodded. "Do you think she's watching us?" "Yes," Sarah replied without hesitation. "I think she's proud of you, and I think she'd want you to be happy." Lily smiled faintly, reaching out to touch the engraved letters of Emily's name. "Hi, Mommy," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rustling leaves. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she watched the scene unfold. In that moment, she realized how far they had come, not just physically but emotionally. Grief no longer defined them. Instead, it had become a bridge connecting past and present, loss and healing. Life settled into a rhythm over the following months. Sarah returned to work part-time, balancing her career with her role as a mother. Lily thrived in school, making friends and excelling in art class. Their home buzzed with energy, filled with laughter and the occasional squabble over bedtime routines. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. What mattered was that they were together. Rachel remained a constant presence in their lives, visiting often and helping Sarah navigate the challenges of parenthood. Though she still mourned Emily's absence, she found solace in knowing Lily was safe and loved. Together, the three of them formed an unconventional yet unbreakable family unit. On special occasions, such as birthdays or holidays, they gathered at the cemetery to honor Michael and Emily. Each visit felt like paying tribute to the people who had shaped their lives in profound ways. Sometimes, Sarah would catch glimpses of strangers tending to nearby graves, placing bouquets or lighting candles. It reminded her that grief was universal, a shared experience that bound humanity together despite its pain. One evening, as Sarah tucked Lily into bed, the little girl looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "Can we read one more story?" she asked. Clutching her stuffed rabbit close, Sarah chuckled, brushing a strand of hair away from Lily's face. "Just one," she agreed, pulling a book from the nightstand. As she read aloud, her voice soft and soothing, Lily drifted off to sleep, her breathing steady and peaceful. Returning to the living room, Sarah sank onto the couch, staring out the window at the starry sky. She thought about everything they had endured. The tears, the sleepless nights, the relentless pursuit of truth. Yet amid the hardships, there had been beauty too. Love had found its way back to her in the form of a little girl who needed her. Redemption had emerged from tragedy, binding them together in ways neither could have predicted. As she sat there reflecting, Sarah noticed something unusual glinting in the moonlight outside. Curious, she stepped onto the porch and walked toward Yale, the source of the shimmer. There, nestled among the wildflowers growing near the edge of her yard, was a single daisy, a flower she hadn't planted herself. Its petals seemed impossibly bright against the dark soil, almost glowing. For a moment, Sarah simply stared at it, her heart swelling with emotion. Then, smiling softly, she bent down and plucked it, holding it gently in her palm. Whether it was coincidence or something more meaningful didn't matter. What mattered was the message it carried. Even in the darkest times, hope blooms. And so, with renewed determination, Sarah stepped back inside, closing the door behind her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, and new opportunities to cherish the family she had fought so hard to protect. Whatever lay ahead, she knew they would face it together, because love, like life itself, always finds a way to endure.